I was never one to go to the movies alone. Something about it felt off, like being in a crowd but still isolated. But that Friday night I needed the distraction. Work had been brutal. My girlfriend and I had fought the night before, and I just wanted to zone out for a couple of hours. The theater was an older place downtown, not one of those shiny multiplexes. It had a certain charm, though. Velvet curtains, faded carpet, and a faint scent of buttered popcorn that seemed baked into the walls. The film was some slow-burn thriller with mixed reviews, but I wasn't there for the movie. I just wanted to sit in the dark, away from the world. I picked a seat near the back, right on the aisle. The place was nearly empty, just a handful of people scattered throughout. A few rows ahead whispered to each other. 2 teenagers giggled near the front. An older guy in a baseball cap sat 3 rows back, face half glowing from his phone screen. The lights dimmed, and I settled in. About 20 minutes in, I felt a presence behind me, the unmistakable feeling of someone sitting directly behind my seat. I shifted slightly in my chair, trying to get a look without making it obvious. Sure enough, there was a man sitting there, hood up, face shadowed. I hadn't heard him come in. I brushed it off. People slip in late all the time. But after a while, something felt wrong. I could hear him breathing. Slow, deliberate. Worse still, I could sense his gaze fixed on me, not the screen. Every time I turned my head just enough to glance back, his eyes were locked on me. He didn't even pretend to watch the movie. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe he was just zoning out. But then his hand slid over the back of my seat, just his fingers, curling slowly around the top. I froze. My skin prickled, and I forced myself to stay calm. He's just messing with you, I thought. Some weird prank. But when I shifted in my seat, his fingers flexed, tightening slightly, almost possessively. I decided to move. I grabbed my jacket and stood up, making my way towards the exit. His hand slipped away as I rose, and I felt him watching me. My legs felt weak as I walked down the aisle. I didn't leave right away, though. Something about storming out felt cowardly, irrational maybe, but I didn't want to give this guy the satisfaction. I stopped by the concession stand, pretending to browse candy, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. I waited 5 minutes before heading back inside. The guy wasn't in his seat anymore. I let out a shaky breath and walked back to my row. 10 minutes later, I caught movement in the reflection of the screen, a shadow sliding down the side aisle. He was there, standing just inside the theater door, hood still up. He wasn't watching the movie, he was watching me. My chest tightened. I kept my eyes forward, pretending not to notice. He moved closer. I thought about getting up again, but the idea of drawing his attention made my stomach twist. I pulled out my phone, holding it low to avoid the bright screen giving me away. I typed a quick text to my friend Greg. "Some guy's following me at the theater, kind of freaked out. Might need you to call me." Greg replied almost instantly. "Weird, want me to swing by?" I typed back, "Maybe." By the time I hit send, the man was standing halfway down the row. He wasn't moving, just standing there, still as stone. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my stuff, practically jogging up the aisle. As soon as I reached the lobby, I asked the bored teenager at the counter to call security. "We don't really have security," he mumbled, barely looking up from his phone. "Then call the cops," I snapped. That got his attention. I stood near the entrance watching the theater doors. Minutes stretched on like hours. Finally, a cop arrived. I explained what had happened and they went inside to take a look. The officer returned after a few minutes, shaking his head. Nobody in there but the moviegoers. I stood there dumbfounded. I swear he was just... I trailed off. The cop gave me a skeptical look. "Probably just some guy messing with you, but we'll stick around until the show ends, just in case." I thanked him and left, feeling embarrassed and paranoid. But when I got home, my phone buzzed. A new message from Greg. "I'm outside, where are you? Thought you said you were still in the theater." My heart stopped. Greg never got my last message. I checked my texts, the one I sent saying maybe. It wasn't there. But there was another message I hadn't seen before. "I see you." I've worked at the Oak Ridge Cinema for nearly a year now. It's an old, worn-out theater that mostly runs second-run movies and cheap midnight screenings. The pay is garbage, the hours are worse, and the customers? Let's just say they're the kind of people who leave half their popcorn on the floor and then complain about the place being dirty. Just the other day, I watched a woman dump her entire bucket of popcorn onto the floor as she stood up, then complained to me about how sticky the aisles were. I just plastered on a fake smile and handed her a broom. But it's easy work, or at least it used to be. The weirdness started about 2 weeks ago. The closing shift usually means me and one other unlucky soul locking up around 1 a.m. after the last screening. That night, it was just me and Ryan, the new guy. He was in the lobby, tallying up concessions while I went to check the theaters, making sure no one had snuck in to sleep or fool around. The moment I stepped into Theater 4, I knew something was off. The dim exit signs cast their usual sickly red glow, but tonight, the overhead lights in Theater 4 seemed to flicker erratically, casting dancing shadows that made the rows of empty seats seem to shift and writhe. I paused for a moment, a prickle of unease on the back of my neck before continuing down the aisle. The air smelled wrong. Not the usual mixture of stale popcorn and spilled soda, but something metallic and sour. My flashlight flickered as I moved down the aisle, scanning the rows of seats. Everything seemed normal, until I saw it. Row H, seat 12. A dark stain smeared across the worn velvet cushion, trailing down onto the sticky floor. It looked fresh. "Ryan," I called out, my voice low, trying to keep the tremor out of it. "Come here for a sec." His footsteps echoed quickly as he hurried in. "What is it?" he asked, his usual laid-back demeanor replaced with a hint of concern. I just pointed. He leaned in, his eyes widening slightly, a look of genuine disgust crossing his face. "Ugh, what the hell? Is that blood?" He took a step back, a nervous energy suddenly radiating off him. My mind raced. Had someone been hurt? Was this some kind of sick joke? A shiver ran down my spine despite the stale warmth of the theater. For the first time, the thought of quitting this dead-end job felt less like a distant fantasy and more like a necessity. I crouched down, rubbing my fingers over the stain. It was tacky, not quite dry. My stomach turned. I shined my light around the surrounding seats, looking for anything else out of place. That's when I noticed it. An empty popcorn bucket sitting 2 seats away. The kernels inside darkened with something that wasn't butter. We checked the security footage. Nothing. No one had been in Theater 4 since the 10 p.m. showing ended. No staff had been in there either, yet that stain hadn't been there during my earlier rounds. I told myself it was some kind of prank. That was the first night I started double-checking the locks before leaving. Then, a few nights later, something worse happened. It was another late shift, this time with Ellie, one of the older employees. She was at the front desk while I did my rounds again. Even though Theater 4 had been cleaned, a knot of anxiety tightened in my chest as I approached the door. What if there was something else? What if the person who did this was still around? I told myself it was ridiculous, that the police had been there, but the feeling of being watched, of something being wrong, wouldn't shake. Halfway through my check, I saw something sticking out from under a seat. At first, I thought it was a dropped piece of clothing, but as I got closer, my stomach clenched. It was a shoe, a man's sneaker, scuffed and dirty, still attached to a foot. I stumbled back, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I screamed Ellie's name. "Ellie! Ellie, come quick!" Her footsteps pounded closer, and she rounded the corner, her usual calm expression turning to one of utter shock as her eyes landed on the body. A sharp intake of breath was the only sound she made for a moment before her face hardened with a grim determination. "Oh, Jesus," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth before she turned and marched quickly towards the lobby, her movements surprisingly steady as she grabbed the phone. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every creak of the old apartment building sounded like footsteps in the dark. The image of that shoe, that lifeless foot, kept flashing behind my eyelids. I kept replaying the moment in my head, wondering if I could have done something, anything. The thought of going back to that theater felt like a lead weight in my stomach. How could I possibly go back to selling popcorn and tearing tickets after seeing something like that? When they arrived, they found no ID, no wallet, nothing. Just a man, dead in the middle of a movie theater we'd locked up hours before. Cause of death, stab wounds, multiple. There was no sign of forced entry. No one had reported seeing anything unusual. The security footage was once again useless. Just like last time, nothing showed up on the cameras. The cops acted like it was just another case, but something felt deeply unsettling about it. No forced entry, no witnesses, nothing on the cameras. It was like the whole thing defied explanation. The cops didn't find a murder weapon. They didn't find any suspects. They took our statements, combed the place for evidence, and then they left, just like that. The theater shut down for a day, then opened again like nothing had happened. Corporate didn't care. The managers didn't care. And customers? They didn't even know. But I knew. Someone had been in that theater. Someone had killed a man and walked right out, unnoticed by staff, unseen by cameras. Maybe they knew exactly where the blind spots were. Maybe they had access to the building in ways we didn't understand. And maybe, just maybe, they were still coming back. The shifts after that were unbearable. Every time I stepped into that dark theater, my pulse quickened. I stopped doing my rounds alone. I made excuses to have Ellie or Ryan check Theater 4 with me. I started keeping a box cutter in my pocket, gripping it tight whenever I had to lock up alone. Then, last night, as I was taking the trash out back, I heard something. Footsteps, quick, deliberate, disappearing around the corner of the building. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My first instinct was to call out, but a cold dread washed over me. Calling out felt like announcing my presence to something unseen, something potentially dangerous. Instead, I turned, backed slowly toward the door, and slammed it shut behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited, listening, but the only sound was the low hum of the neon sign flickering above the entrance. Nothing happened. Not then, at least. But when I went back inside, I noticed something. The back door, the one leading to the alley, was unlocked. I know I locked it earlier. I distinctly remember the click as I turned the deadbolt before heading out with the trash. Someone had been there, and they hadn't needed to break in. I don't know if I'm going back tonight. I don't know if I'll even bother quitting or just stop showing up. But if I do go back, I'm bringing something sharper than a box cutter.